So we are going to discuss about the basics of diagnosis and therapy of neuroendocrine tumors. Just to begin, uh, all of us are aware that we have a well-oiled facility for radionuclide therapy, both in Tata Memorial Hospital and Radiation Medicine Center, that is RMC. So regarding the basics, we all know how neuroendocrine tumors are classified. We also have the WHO 2019 classification now. Uh, Coming to what we do in our department, I'll just start with a few slides about imaging before I go ahead with the therapy part. Now, whenever you refer a patient for a DOTA PET CT, what exactly is DOTA PET? So, any isotope or any PET scan when you do, there are three portions in the name of any kind of radiopharmaceutical that we use. The first portion is always the radioisotope, that is the radiation emitting substance, which is gallium 68. So when you refer a patient for FDG PET, it is 18F FDG PET. So 18F is the substance which emits radiation. Next part is your DOTA talk. So that is the DOTA is nothing but a binding linker between the radioisotope and the somatostatin analog. So gallium 68 becomes the radiation emitting substance. DOTA is the linker, and TOC is nothing but the octreotide, which is labeled to gallium 68. So this is how the name gallium 68 DOTA TOC has come into picture. Now we have different kinds of octreotide counterparts which we use. We use DOTA NOC, DOTA TATE, DOTA TOC, and so on and so forth. So this is how per se the name has emerged. Now, how do we make this radiopharmaceutical? So unlike FDG PET, which is manufactured or synthesized in a cyclotron, which we have in our Tata Hospital basement in the annex building, unlike that, we have a gallium 68 generator in our own department. So it is an in-house synthesis that we do. What is a generator? Basically, there is a parent element, which is germanium 68, which keeps on decaying throughout the year, and we can elute gallium 68 from it maybe once a day, and then label it with the octreotide, and this is how we manufacture the radiopharmaceutical. So this is just a kind of a simple explanation of how we synthesize this radiopharmaceutical. So basically, this is an in-house preparation. We do DOTA studies on every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday in Department of Nuclear Medicine at TMH. So as I said, we have three parts. Now coming to how the scan looks. Pardon me, I think there's some issue with the PPT. Okay, so this is how the normal gallium dotatate PET CT looks. So you have, these are the sites of normal physiological uptake. You have uptake in the pituitary, faint uptake in the thyroids. Now the prominent areas where you see uptake is the spleen, which shows the highest uptake, followed by liver, and you have excretion through the kidneys. So you get uptake in the entire KUB, that is kidneys, ureter, and bladder. And there is a very peculiar physiological area of uptake that we see in the uncinate process of the pancreas. Now, when do we advise a gallium DOTA PET CT? Normally, in the initial workup of patients with low to intermediate grade neuroendocrine tumors. This is one such case. This is a very typical case of grade 1 NET where you have intense uptake. How do we quantitate this uptake? It is basically what we do is we have something known as a Craning score. So any uptake which is more than the liver, as well as more than the liver and spleen, is considered as Craning's 3 and 4. And this is how we consider it as significant uptake on a gallium dotatate PET CT. So here you can see that the uptake is significantly higher than the uptake, physiological uptake in the spleen, as well as that in the liver. This is a typical grade 1 NET, which is well localized, brilliantly enhancing one CT component, and it shows intense uptake. Now, if you look at the guidelines, it is now well recommended in the European Association of Nuclear Medicine that you can do a gallium DOTA PET CT in case of grade 1 foregut, midgut, hindgut NETs, as well as if you have a suspected JEPNET, it becomes the first choice of investigation. Just to summarize, you can do it in a diagnosed case of grade 1, grade 2 NET of unknown primary site, when you have a high index of suspicion on conventional imaging to direct a biopsy. And again, the most important thing is, in order for patients to qualify for somatostatin receptor directed therapy, that is PRRT. Now, why do we do an FDG PET in addition to gallium dotatate PET CT? This is how an FDG PET looks like. So if you have to, differentiate between the two scans, FDG will have a very high uptake in the brain because it is a glucose analog. So that is how the brain functions. Whereas dotatate will have physiology, there will be absolutely no uptake in the brain, whereas there will be intense uptake in the spleen and the liver. So just to give you a differentiation. Now, as we move from low grade to high grade, your degree of differentiation, it becomes more and more de-differentiated. As a result, your somatostatin receptor expression goes down and your glucose receptor expression goes up, as a result of which your DOTA uptake will be heterogeneous, whereas your FDG uptake will become more and more prominent as you go towards grade 3. Now there is this gray area where this is a very typical case where you have a MIB index of 8 to 10%, and you can see this is a gallium dotatate PET CT, no uptake in the brain, extensive metastasis in the lung, liver, bones, and this is the FDG PET, where you get a congruent uptake in all the lesions that were seen on. So this is the kind of tumor heterogeneity we get. So this is the same patient where on the left side you have a DOTA PET, whereas on the right side you have an FDG PET. And
Amey, sorry to interrupt, but your screen is not visible.
Oh, okay. Give me a moment. Is it visible now, Anand?
Yes, it is.
So this is the FDG PET for the same patient. This is the DOTA PET, and then since it is 8 to 10%, we also got an FDG PET done, and you get a congruent uptake in all the lesions. You get an intense uptake in the liver, as well as the lung lesions, as well as the skeletal met. So if you compare both the scans, you have a dual uptake that we see. Now there are many different kinds of scoring systems in order to grade the dual uptake. NetPET score is one. What we consider in our department is any uptake in the liver which is known as more than the background liver uptake, we consider it as a positive FDG PET. So the standard blood pool uptake that is present in the liver, as well as maybe the mediastinal blood pool, if at all, any uptake in the whole body which is more than that other than the brain, is we consider it to be a positive FDG PET. Now if you compare the impact of both the scans on the clinical management, basically in G1 nets, there is no significant impact as far as the change in management goes, whereas there is a moderate impact in the grade 2 NETs. So when do we add an FDG PET, especially when you have a grade 1 patient? So this is one case where this is a TMH patient where you had a PS3 patient, 44-year-old male, multiple lesions, extensive skeletal as well as marrow metastasis. This was a very typical histology of grade 1 that was seen. However, the disease extent was so much that we decided that let's do an FDG PET since the performance status is poor and there is extensive disease. However, the FDG uptake was not much. So typically, as you see that FDG PET is not of great utility when you are imaging in grade 1 neuroendocrine tumors. Now, what is our experience, particularly from our department? When we analyzed 207 patients over the last 3 years, we found that only 56 patients with a MIB index of less than 5%, and they had were included in this analysis. And what we saw that the change in management due to FDG positivity was seen in only 6 patients out of the 56 patients. That is in around 10% of the patients. Now, considering the numbers that we do, we need to update this database now. And when we look at the other side, that is the grade 2 NETs, the change in management was seen in nearly 41% of the patients after an FDG PET. And in patients in the restaging scenario, we saw that the change in management was seen in almost 96% of the patients. So when you add an FDG PET in grade 2, the impact is much more. Now coming to PRRT, when you are selecting patients for PRRT, the most important thing is the patient should have a positive gallium dotatate PET-CT. That is, the craning score should be 3 or 4. That means that the uptake in the lesion should be higher than the physiological uptake in the liver and or spleen. Now, why do we say that the uptake should be higher? Now, what is PRRT? PRRT is nothing but labeling octreotide to a therapeutic radiopharmaceutical. Now, when we do a gallium dotatate PET-CT, we have gallium-68, which is a radiation emitting substance. But now when we talk about radiation emitting substance, there are two types, one which can be used for imaging, the second ones are which can be used for therapy. Now gallium-68 is an imaging radiopharmaceutical, whereas your ligand as well as the pharmaceutical, that is the octreotide, remains the same. What we are doing is we are replacing gallium-68 with lutetium-177, which is a beta emitter that can be used for therapy. So that makes somatostatin receptor expression on gallium dotatate PET-CT the most essential requirement for a patient who is going to be receiving PRRT. Now the trial which kind of made PRRT come into limelight was the NETTER-1 trial, which established its role in case of metastatic locally advanced well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumors of the gastroenteropancreatic region. There was a significant improvement in the PFS rate as well as the response in the lutetium dotatate group as compared to the control group, which was octreotide LAR 60 milligrams, the double dose, and the toxicity parameters also were in favor. Now, what exactly did we do when we select a patient for PRRT? Now, if you look at these, the chemical component of this isotope, these are octreotides. So these are peptides which are being labeled to radiopharmaceuticals, and typically peptides get excreted through the kidneys. So there is a good chance of a potential nephrotoxicity when we are administering patients PRRT. So what do we do? So when we are selecting patients, the most important thing is to assess the renal function. So we do two types of scans. First is the GFR estimation, that is on a DTPR renogram, and second is the cortical function on a EC renogram. So these are the two scans that we do apart from the routine CBC, HB, and liver functional parameters. Now, once we have a GFR which is more than 60 and an EC clearance which is more than around 175, we select these patients for PRRT. If the GFR is less, somewhere between 45 to 60, then we reduce the dose of PRRT. And then administer it. In addition, we follow something which is known as an amino acid infusion protocol, where we use lysine and arginine in specific percentages, and we administer the amino acid infusion. The first infusion is given before we start PRRT. Then we administer the actual radionuclide therapy, and then again we give 2 infusions of amino acid. So this is basically a day care procedure, but it takes around 4 to 6 hours for the entire process to take place. And considering that lutetium 177 is having low energy of beta, the patient can be discharged on the same day from the therapy ward. This is how we pre-medicate the patient. This is a very standard pre-medication protocol that we follow. All of you must be aware of this. Now, as I said, this is our therapy ward. These are the pictures from our ward itself, which is on the 9th floor of the annex building. So amino when 10%, we administer 11 ml per minute for 30 minutes. Next 30 minutes, we administer lutetium 177 peptide, which is 200 millicurie. That is the unit for radio activity, and we dilute it in 100 ml. And over the next 3 hours, we again give the amino acid infusion. So this is the procedure which takes place over 4 hours, and then we do a post-therapy scan and then discharge the patient. Now the standard follow-up of patients is we assess every patient after 2 cycles. And we don't do a gallium dotatate PET CT after every cycles, but we consider 2 cycles to be the optimum time period after which the response can be assessed. Typically, the gap between 2 cycles is around 8 to 12 weeks. So after I give the first therapy, the reassessment or the post-therapy gallium dotatate PET CT is done typically after 6 to 8 months after I have administered 2 cycles. We look at the clinical parameters, the quality of life parameters, and of course, gallium dotatate PET CT after every 2 cycles. So far, we have treated 86 patients. That is almost 346 cycles of lutetium dotatate PRRT we have administered, of which 32 patients have completed 4 cycles and are now on follow-up. Grade 1 nausea and vomiting was seen in 5, grade 1 hematotoxicity in 21 patients, grade 2 hematotoxicity in 1 patient, only 1 patient, which was our first patient, he went into hepatocellular failure, however recovered in 24 hours. And so far 46 patients have undergone DOTA-PET after 2 cycles, of which stable disease or non-progression was seen in 35 patients. So this is our experience so far as PRRT is concerned. Now combination therapy, we as a unit, that is NET clinic or in association with medical oncology, we have been administering combination therapy, that is PRRT plus chemotherapy, that is CAPTEM, in a select subgroup of patients which show gallium dotatate as well as FDG positivity in case of grade 2 NETs. And we also have a prospective trial running, which is a phase 3 RCT, where we select patients with G1 and G2, that is all the grade 1 patients who have progressed within 6 months, and grade 2. So all basically well differentiated FDG positive neuroendocrine tumors who are randomized for lutetium PRRT versus PRRT plus chemotherapy. Now this is one case of a grade 3 NET that came to us. Basically, he presented with constipation, weight loss. The initial CT that was done outside raised the suspicion of HCC or a cholangio-CA. However, looking at the vascularity, we thought that it could be a neuroendocrine tumor. Hence, a DOTA-PET was done, which showed intense somatostatin receptor expression with a sternal met. Biopsy was done from the liver, which showed a neuroendocrine tumor grade 3 small cell type. This is the FDG scan for the patient. So there was a much higher FDG uptake in areas where there was no DOTA expression or a somatostatin receptor expression. So this patient received PRRT plus CAPTEM, and after 4 cycles, this is the response. This patient is still on follow-up, completed his last cycle in Jan 2020, and the patient is still doing well. Now coming to neoadjuvant PRRT. So now this is the basic concept how we give PRRT in case of in the metastatic setting after the patient has progressed on LAR, which is the standard indication. However, now indications are being tailored as the responses have evolved over the last 2-3 years, and we also, in case of borderline resectable pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors or in patients who have limited liver burden, where there is a chance that the patient can undergo curative resection at a later stage, the patients do receive neoadjuvant PRRT. Of course, there are studies which are published in literature where they have indicated neoadjuvant PRRT for downstaging in patients with high risk features of recurrence. In cases of vascular invasion in the upfront scan, then in case of liver metastasis, which can be addressed with a curative intent, either with RFA, microwave ablation, or resection at a later stage. Patients who have a high Ki-67, and then looking at the margin status in the initial scan. Now, this is one such study where they have shown that a curative resection was achieved in 16 patients post PRRT after a significant reduction in size as well as extent of disease was shown. A few patients had vascular SMV and portal vein invasion, which showed a good response following initial 2 cycles of adjuvant PRRT, with an increment in median PFS as well as also the post-operative incidence of pancreatic fistula was much lesser in patients who underwent neoadjuvant PRRT and then surgery. There is a significant increment in the quality of life in patients who receive PRRT. This is the quality of life index parameters which were published from the NETTER-1 trial in Journal of Clinical Oncology. And they used these three scales, and they showed that the quality of life in patients was much better as compared to the octreotide LAR arm in the NETTER-1 study. Again, in case of G3 NETs, we have treated 4 to 5 patients where PRRT has shown reasonable response. I won't say we have achieved good response in G3 NETs. Many of these patients have progressed within a year or so, but overall, I think it is a good treatment modality to offer in patients who have gallium positivity in case of G3 neuroendocrine tumors. So this is one study where they have shown that the predictors of outcome in G3 NENs is the baseline performance status, differentiation, and the plasma LDH and AFP levels. So coming to the final conclusion, as we know that functional imaging is the fulcrum of management in case of neuroendocrine tumors. Pathology and the proliferation index determines the treatment algorithm. And we have to account for the tumor heterogeneity when we are treating the patients of neuroendocrine tumor. PRRT is now established therapeutic option, and combination of PRRT with chemotherapy is essential to tackle the tumor heterogeneity. In addition, we have since last 3 months also started the intra-arterial approach to PRRT in patients where the liver burden is very high. That is, liver lesions are multifocal, greater than 3 centimeters. However, we have a good FLR and extrahepatic disease burden is low, where you have a primary and liver metastasis. In that case, we administer PRRT through intra-arterial route. What we do is we take the help of IR, and 100, the dose is divided. So in the right hepatic, we administer 100 millicuries and left hepatic 100 millicuries. And basically what we achieve is, though ultimately the tracer is going to enter the venous circulation. However, the first pass localization of radiopharmaceutical, or the first pass binding of the radiopharmaceutical to the somatostatin receptors is very high when we administer through the intra-arterial route. We have done dosimetry for such patients, and we have got good radiation dose delivered to the liver through the intra-arterial route, almost coming to 20 to 30 grays. So 4 patients, we have almost treated 5 patients, and we have given 8 cycles of intra-arterial PRRT. And out of these, 3 patients have shown partial response. 1 patient is now going to undergo surgery for the primary after showing good response in the liver metastasis. So overall, this is what PRRT is about. It is not a great difficult concept to understand, and I'm sure you would have understood as well. So if you have any questions, I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you, Amir. That was, conveyed very in a simple manner, and I hope most of the residents were able to understand. If you could just look at the
Yeah.
chat box and start taking questions, and then the
Yeah.
residents can also take questions. Yeah.
So FDG PET we hardly do in case of grade 1 NETs. Only in patients where we feel that the performance status is poor at presentation, there are extensive skeletal metastasis, liver burden of disease is high. We feel that then FDG is recommended, because most of the times these patients go directly for PRRT, and we feel that some patients may have heterogeneity, because most of the grade 1 NETs normally present with localized disease, and when you in the upfront setting have such a high disease burden, it raises a high index of suspicion that there could be a heterogeneous component as well. So that is the okay. Radiological feature for raising suspicion of NET is these are hypervascular tumors, very well localized. Unlike if you look at the uh, adenocarcinomas, pancreatic adenocarcinomas, they are normally locally invasive. You see invasion of the surrounding structures, the vein, adjacent colon. Whereas if you see a grade 1 NET, you will find a typical coin-like lesion, which is brilliantly enhancing. If you compare the vascularity with those, normally we do a triphasic CT in any liver lesion under suspicion or any lesion that is unknown primary. So when you compare the vascularity of that lesion with the enhancement in the liver or the hepatic vasculature, you see that the enhancement is much more brilliant in the lesion as compared to that in the adjacent hepatic vasculature. So these are some telltale signs where you can say that this lesion is typical of a neuroendocrine tumor. DOTA PET indicated in NEC, no, it is not indicated. I mean, as far as I have to answer, as per the guidelines, there is no indication for doing a DOTA PET in neuroendocrine carcinoma, unless there are certain patients. We have 5 patients in our series where there was negative FDG PET, and hence we got a DOTA PET done. And then we saw that there was DOTA uptake in these patients. We asked the pathologist to review the slides. However, they were pretty sure that this is a neuroendocrine carcinoma. So there are few anecdotal cases. Otherwise, there is no indication.
Yeah. To Amit, to add on to what Amey has said, I mean, as you go from 50% MIB index to 20%, the chances of your having a DOTA uptake along with an FDG uptake are there. So, let's say you have a patient who has a MIB index, a grade 3 an NEC, which is anything about 20%. Now, I think, and Amey can correct me, 20 to 55 is also called grade 3 NETs.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So as you go from 55 to 20, you do have a small chance of having DOTA positivity. So, in those cases, let's say the MIB is 20 to 25% and the FDG uptake is not great, you may consider a DOTA to assess a possible therapeutic option. Yeah.
So in TMH data, 26 patients showed a PR out of the 46 who have completed PRRT so far. So total 34 patients have showed non-progression in patients who have received PRRT, or those who have completed 4 cycles.
Do any of the residents have any questions? Any of the residents in terms of technique or any doubts on how PRRT is done? Anyone? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so acute hematological toxicity. So okay, so I'll come to this. So normally what we observe in patients who have poor renal function, why do we reduce the dose? Mainly because when your excretion of the tracer is hampered by the renal route, your chances of marrow burden or the tracer getting more accumulation in the marrow becomes higher, because these are all dose dependent tracers. So if the amount of isotope excreted through the kidney goes down, your toxicity to the other organ is significantly increased. So Why do we decrease the dose in case of patients having renal function is not just to protect the kidneys, but also to avoid potential hematotoxicity. Normally, what happens in patients with bone metastasis or marrow metastasis, again, we reduce the dose because there is a chance of these patients have poor marrow results. So there is a chance of hematotoxicity. Otherwise, in patients who have baseline normal CBC, we have, as I showed, we have only 5 patients who showed grade 1 hematotoxicity. Otherwise, there was no hematotoxicity seen. Gap between 2 cycles, 8 to 12 weeks between every 2 cycles. Now, when we are giving combination therapy, the CAPTEM regimen is administered between the 2 cycles, sandwiched between the 2 cycles of PRRT in that way. So the standard guidelines is to have 8 to 12 weeks between 2 cycles of PRRT. At present, are we considering patients in first line? Yes, we are, where the patients have a very high disease burden, where you have extensive liver mets, which kind of will. So what is the objective of first line? Where your gallium scan is showing intense somatostatin receptor expression. That means that whatever octreotide you are labeling is going to get saturated there. It is going to emit radiation, and your disease burden is going to go down. That is where you have an aggressive, or when you have a high burden of disease, extensive metastatic disease, you can administer lutetium PRRT as a first line treatment. When you have a localized disease, uh, maybe presenting as multiple polyps in the duodenum, or maybe 2 liver lesions with a solitary ileal primary. In that case, octreotide LAR becomes the first line of treatment in order to reduce the symptoms of the patient, as well as all these patients don't require such an aggressive treatment because the disease burden is very low. So these patients can be either observed or put on octreotide LAR. Approximate cost. Now, cost in TMH is 70,000 per cycle. Cost in radiation medicine center is 20,000 per cycle. In private, it is 1.5 to 2 lakhs. So, Craning score is a visual score. I'll share my screen.
Just as an add-on to the earlier question by Amit, are we considering lutetium therapy in first line? I think for residents, it's important to understand that the by the book answer is that it is not recommended currently in first line.
Yeah.
And Amit can correct me.
Yeah,
In
correct.
all tumors which have a MIP of less than 10,
Correct.
technically the answer to that should be an LA. It should be an octreotide analog.
Yes.
But I mean, more and more as we see that the so-called PFS with LAR is anywhere between 14 months to 20 months, that will be lower in those patients, as Amey has said, who have a heavy burden of disease, have a slightly higher MIB index. So that, I mean, residents should remember that, I mean, in the clinic, in your mind, the first thing that should come is LAR, and then you can discuss on an individual patient basis. Yeah. Please go ahead, Amey.
Yeah, so this is about the Craning score. So basically what we are doing is you have something known as a dual score in lymphoma for response assessment. So this is a Craning score where what we are doing, any radiopharmaceutical has sites where the pharmaceutical goes and localizes at physiological sites of uptake. So you have intense somatostatin receptor expression, normal expression in the spleen, liver. So any uptake that we see on this MIP image, that is this is a MIP image that we normally acquire when we do a PET CT. Any uptake which is more than liver as well as more than spleen. So Craning's 3 is more than liver but less than spleen. So I'll start from Craning's 1 is less than liver. Craning's 2 is equal to liver. Craning's 3 is more than liver but less than spleen, and Craning's 4 is more than spleen. So anything that is Craning's 3 and 4 is suggestive of intense somatostatin receptor expression, and that qualifies the patient for PRRT. So this is about what Craning score is. For follow-up, yes, for follow-up we use Craning score, but we more rely on the metabolic criteria, that is the URTC criteria, as well as RECIST 1.1.
Any other questions? for this lecture. I can't see any other questions. So thank you, Ameya. Thanks a ton for taking this lecture on
Thanks.
Saturday
Thanks,
and
Anand.
waking you up.